All right. So welcome everybody. We have another very exciting week here, and thank you for joining us so much. So just for people that are new, just to let you know, Envoys for Humanity, we're an organization, we're a group of super volunteers that just came together online to try to make change. And so we're a social network that nurtures volunteerism. So we bring in people that maybe have a passion or an interest or concern, and they don't know what to do with that energy. And so we're here to help them, to provide support, to hook them up with organizations, and also join them with people. Really, because we have Sharon here all over the world, just coming together to make change. And it's always fun to do it when you're working together with friends. And so that's kind of the idea of Envoys for Beto and who we are. And we have people from all over the country and England. So thank you guys again for being here. My name is Kari Ramirez, and I'm the co-founder of Envoys for Beto. I'm sorry, Envoys for Humanity. We started with Beto. Envoys for Humanity. So the way we start out each of these weeks is, if you can, put your email and where you're from in the chat. And then that way we can give you a follow-up newsletter, so you'll be able to get information on what we covered during this time. And then, oh, the puppy dog, I see Jeremy's puppy. And then also what we are going to be doing in the weeks ahead. And we'll talk about the kind of cool stuff that we have going on during the rest of the week that you guys can get involved with. And so one other thing that I wanted to add to that is, so we're going to have our speakers. We're so excited to have a special musical guest that we just got last minute, so thank you. We will, at the end of this, we are going to leave some time if you guys do want to stay and just chat and connect and be a little more social and less structured. You're more than welcome to stay after we're all done. If you can't stay, we completely understand, and we won't hold it against you, but it's just kind of a time to relax a little bit and just check in and see how everybody's doing and things. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Scott so he can talk about our guest speaker for today.
Thank you, Kari. Well, we are extremely excited to have Jeremy Smith with us today. Jeremy is one who spent his formative years at oh my goodness, not the Air Force Academy, but rather West Point. Thank you, Scott. And he went on to win the Marshall Scholar and study epidemiology as a graduate in Europe before joining the United States Army and serving in the special ops on multiple continents. Jeremy has finished his service to the country after being a West Point grad, which of course is a huge honor and something that is extremely hard to get into. And he has gone on from the time 16 cycle. He worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign for a stint right before he blasted off into other endeavors and settled where I think he worked on the Georgia campaign after Hillary lost, and then he also worked on the and then wound up in Austin, and he met Madeline Eden at some point during that time, and together they have launched Register to Vote. They've built Map the Vote. They have now created a company that might be the most exciting political technology company in the country because of the just amazing insight and planning that they together have provided in building this company. And anyway, the other thing that Jeremy has done that is super exciting, he's co-founded Blue Squad, which a lot of you envoys have already gotten on. And so on that note, welcome, Jeremy, and let's go ahead and get into to a few questions. How's it going, Jeremy?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for that very kind intro, and Thank you all for saying hello to our puppy. Someone, unfortunately, may have had to abandon her nearby, so we took her in last week, and she's very excited for all of the noise and the activity. So she's going to be bouncing in and out a lot.
That is awesome. Well, she can connect with Kristen's dog Roxy, perhaps, as we move along here. And so, Jeremy, again, thank you so much. This is the second time you and I have met virtually, and part of the model, it seems, at Civitech is to kind of help upstart kind of outfits such as Envoys for Humanity. And we are so appreciative of the kind of nurturing and mentorship that y'all have provided via Civitech, as well as through Blue Squad. Both teams are working so seamlessly together. So I would just like to get a little bit of insight from you as to how it came about, the order of all the different, you've got so many irons in the fire. I know that y'all did register to vote first. Can you tell us just a little bit about the chronology of how those different endeavors came about, Civitech and Blue Squad, as well as register to vote and map to vote?
Yeah, of course. I think this is a room full of very similar people who have the same problem, but I find it very hard to say no to working on things when it's important and somebody is doing a good job, and it matters. So I left the military planning to join Hillary Clinton's professional, like the government side, and obviously didn't get the job. And then at that point kind of became more and more interested in electoral politics, but in particular some of the like infrastructure challenges. My experience in 2016 was that everyone really wanted to be there. It was like this seminal moment, this like kind of, we thought we were on this path to win in a big way, and volunteers really wanted to be there, but we didn't do a very good job of utilizing their talents. Like everyone was asked to pretty much do the same thing, stand in front of Walmart, stand at the mall, and like hand out flyers or ask everyone who walks by whether or not they're going to vote for you, or it was primarily phone banking back then still. And so it was like, sit here, call this list. The numbers were really bad. You were expected to get like 1 out of 100 to be like a successful connection, which is a miserable experience for people as volunteers, to say, come do something 100 times and have a bad experience 99 times. And please come back next week. It didn't really match what I thought both people could contribute and what we really needed to succeed. And in particular, it just, it was a problem of imagination and creativity, and like a willingness to learn who the volunteers were. And I think, and many times, these very capable people, but who were kind of high priced consultants, there was this attitude of like, they're just a volunteer, it doesn't matter. And it was like, that person is a marketing professional with 30 years of experience at like getting people to buy some product that they didn't want to buy before, which is basically similar to running a presidential campaign. And so like, this person could help us because we suck at communications in this area, and yet we're turning them away because they don't want to phone bank again after having just really kind of trudged through the mud with it. So I really was trying to build a better experience for volunteers that, could appreciate and use their talents, mostly as an organizer and as a volunteer myself. So I was a volunteer. I was a super volunteer, like a full-time, 120 hours a week volunteer for the Clinton campaign and for Doug Jones and all these others. And in 2018, I was returning home to Texas and looking at this law in particular that is really bad here, which prevents people from helping others register to vote. And it's a unique law. It's one of the last of its kind. It's an old Jim Crow law to kind of prevent those, New York Jews from bringing their buses down here and registering, Black voters. We can't have that here in Texas. So, we have this law that prevents that. And my thinking was, what if we got some people in tech to help us build a way around it so that we don't have to deal with, we don't have to accept that these bad laws are how we have to like organize. So register to vote was really an attempt to solve the problem of how do we help people who don't own a printer or who don't own stamps or envelopes or know where to send their form in or how voter registration works, How do we solve every one of those things for them so they have zero hurdles? We can help them fill out this form one time, name, address, date of birth, and then we can mail you and give you a solution that you can mail back on your own time, but we put a barcode so we can track it. So we know if Jeremy has been sent a voter registration form and if he has sent it back and if the county has accepted it. So we're really doing a few different things. We're helping the organization keep track of its voters. We're helping the voters keep track of their status and ensure they vote. And we're tracking and monitoring the election officials to make sure that they are not behaving badly. And all of that was a very simple kind of system. We don't need any bleeding edge technology. It doesn't need artificial intelligence. We don't need any biotech, right? It was, we could use engineers who have the skills to do something very simple. So Register to Vote was all about how do we help make the volunteer experience better and make the voter experience easier. And so that is kind of how the concept was born. And it was meant to be temporary. We did it to help the Beto campaign. In the state party here in Texas, and we meant to like kind of shove it onto them after proving that it worked, and sort of everybody kind of shoved it back on us and said, "What about our state?" And so we said, "Well, sure, we'll help your state, and oh, you know, might as well just solve it for all 50 at this point." So that's kind of how we got going.
Wow, that is amazing. And so then, when did you meet Cheyenne, and when did Blue Squad come into the picture?
In 2018, I was helping a congressional candidate in Austin, Texas, named Joseph Kopser. He was like a tech guy who had been a teacher of mine at West Point. He had been in the Army. He taught at the University of Texas, and then he founded his own company for like clean energy and green transportation here in Austin. And because of the similar backgrounds, and he was the candidate in 2018, I was helping him out. And he had been in contact with all of these tech leaders in Austin, several of whom had really, really good ideas for things we could do right now to help people see who their friends were that had not registered to vote or who had not voted, on Twitter, on Facebook, on any kind of social media. And they were trying to help Joseph, and Joseph asked me to go meet with them and figure out a way to do it. So they wanted to build a company because the thinking is that, you know, we have organizations like yours that are kind of sometimes sit more in the nonprofit or maybe the PAC realm. And there's the League of Women Voters, and there's Swing Left and all these groups. But we also have candidates like Beto or you know, this congressional candidate, Joseph Kopser. And you can't, as a nonprofit, work with the candidates. As a candidate, you can't work with the nonprofits. So the thinking was, what if we create a public company, like a public benefit company, right? Not like a publicly traded company, but you know, the modern B Corp whose mission is to help Democrats get elected. But now you can legally sell the tool at whatever price you want to both sides. And so it was a way to really do a passion project, to help a lot of people and potentially to like build out a lot more technology to help. And so this was, you know, Cheyenne and Steve had this idea that was, I thought, very, very good. And they asked me to help them with the politics of it. And so I said, yes, like, this is great. We have to do this. We put a lot of effort into it. And what was great about it was we created this system in 2018. It was all manual. So we had to look it up every night. And I would, you know, pull all the information from the political groups together. Steve was the data guy. He would match everybody to the voter file. And then Cheyenne would send out emails every night to every Blue Squad user, and this is the earliest days, that said, Jeremy, here are 10 of your friends who have not voted yet. Every single day of early voting, we would show you which of your friends had not voted yet. So you could see this like running tally every morning of like, you got to get these people today. And people loved it. It was really cool. They could figure it out on their own, but we were basically empowering them with all of the data that the campaign had. And it was all volunteer. Nobody was charged any money, of course. You know, for a couple, like it was about 100 people as users really just had such a great experience with it. And Cheyenne had a lot of ideas for how to turn that more and more into a community that could sustain itself for more than just the 2 weeks of early voting. And so he has really led that company, I think, extremely well. And, you know, I'm very happy to support him and help him and connect him politically and essentially help him break through into the kind of more established groups in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you know that I had been dreaming of, and so when Steve met Madeline and we heard about, you know, all the great work you're doing, and we dug in to see you know, what you had cooking with Blue Squad, it really it almost seems like a bit of a microcosm of, I mean, in the model, as opposed to Civitech, in the sense that both of them are able to bring in multiple organizations and to kind of integrate people and organizations, campaigns, into one kind of a force. And it reminds me a little bit, and even the names, the Blue Squad, of your background, coming out of you know, this military background with the special ops, which is just so
It definitely went. It was Cheyenne, I think, had the idea for squad based off of some sort of internet hashtag that I am woefully inexperienced with. But
yeah.
apparently, there's some sort of squad goals or something. And Michelle Obama released her squad goals when he was trying to think of a name, and so he created Blue Squad, hoping that Michelle Obama would like it. You know.
I love
So
it.
I don't think it wasn't intended to be in the military sense, but I do think it's the right idea. It's a unit of people working together to accomplish more than any individual can, and really for progressive good.
Right. And we should be good at that as progressives, because, you know, we aspire to bring everybody in, and I marvel at how the other side tends to, it's more about me, at the conservative kind of theory of conservatism, and yet they kind of socked it to us in some areas in 2016. Of course, there were some things that went on that that didn't seem very fair. But I wonder, as you, with your special ops background, your epidemiology background, and whatnot, as you size up the situation, I mean, we're already hearing about Russian troll farms in Ghana, and you have a really unique kind of skill set and and history to kind of assess where we are as we look at Blue Squad as a tool, for example, and other tools where organizations like Envoys can be rapid response agents out there combating against, you know, in a coordinated manner against these troll attacks and this type of thing in social media. Where do you see all this? And can you just talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah. So I think a big piece of this is like, you know, the Russians have been doing this to other countries for a long time. Like, I mean, you know, there's lots of nations, including our own, obviously, influence elections. But this particular modern form of cyber hacking and everything else they've been doing to Estonia, to Ukraine, to the nation of Georgia and the Caucasus, to Afghanistan, to Iran. They've been wielding that since about 2008 or 9. And I think there was an attitude that was like, we're way too big for them to do that to us. We're not that kind of country where, you know, run by a totalitarian despot, you know, in the Eastern Bloc that can easily be pushed around by Russia. And what's really strange, of course, is that the Mitt Romney party of Russia, right? And the jury, think about all of your friends, or maybe yourselves, who like care about a particular like sports team. Nobody like sat there and evaluated all 32 teams and decided which one was the best fit. And I think, and it's treated as entertainment rather than as something of like serious substance, where it really spots to let or kill organizations, because it's not merely like the Russians are doing this cynically, and they are exploiting divides that already exist here, especially like racial divides, but those have real world consequences to individual people and cities where that's happening, and we have like a kind of a duty and an obligation to, as leaders and as citizens, to not, you know, fall prey so easily. And it seems to me like we should assume it will only get worse. There's no reason to think that something I read, I think last year, was that there was evidence that Iran, Pakistan, China, France, Germany, Russia were all and North Korea were all already running troll farms in the U.S. on our elections. And there's lots of other countries that are getting into the game because it can be beneficial to their national interests to create. I mean, if I were the Russians, the most creative thing I would do is obviously hack and support the Democrats, because you would really fuck with everybody if you screw with the election in favor of Democrats now against Republicans, because now which one do we complain now, right? Like, if it's to our benefit. And I worry about things like that, where we might end up with a series of, you know, a situation where we will end up with a lot more problems from essentially like the chicanery from groups participating in a variety of types of like election misinformation. And so I think the answer is like, we're going to have a lot of problems. We're going to have a really serious misinformation problem. And what we have to do about that is none of us can fix it. None of us can influence Russia unless one of you has a close personal connection with Vladimir Putin and something you can hold over his head for us. That would be great. But like, I don't see any way to stop that. And honestly, it's not even the Russians I'm totally worried about. It's the cynicism of like Republican groups who will encourage people to drink disinfectant or inject UV rays into their body, or to avoid vaccines or to refuse stay-at-home orders because of freedom. And this idea that the disease is like political, those are like real world problems from our own people that we can't even say is like a crime per se. The Trump campaign is just allowed to lie on Facebook ads, and we know that they are going to behave worse than we are. So we have to develop rapid response systems that can fight back, push back against misinformation. I think we all have to become a lot more comfortable calling things out that aren't true and making it normal in civic life to say, you can't just say whatever you want because of freedom. You can't go around claiming that this person who's a small business owner of a pizza restaurant is secretly tunneling children for sex slavery for Hillary Clinton. That's a ridiculous thing. You have to prove it. You can't just walk around. What is being put out there in a harmful way and to rapidly disseminate a response. And I think the opportunity to use relational tools and distributed campaigning and organizing is a chance to do that. In the same way it's easy to create misinformation, it is also easy for any person to go look it up, come up with a creative and clever response, and disseminate like a meme that pushes back on the garbage that's coming from. But we have to do it in a way that doesn't sink to the same level of cynicism, because if it just becomes two polar opposite cynical camps, there are a lot of people who will just be turned off by that experience altogether and who already hate politics and don't want to talk about it. But what we really need to do is find better ways to have difficult conversations with people we already know, and to make it normal to care about other people's healthcare. That it's not a matter of, it's not like a political game to whether or not we get better healthcare in this country. It's about not having 100,000 people die in a month because we weren't paying attention to a disease we knew was coming. And that like that should be something that resonates with anybody. This matters to other people's children. Should matter to your own children, to your own family members, your own grandparents.
Right. So the relational aspect of Blue Squad and its accessibility really quickly to people like us, envoys on the front lines, and our friends and family. Can you talk just a little bit about how relational organizing has become such an important and well accepted strategy, and why people need to embrace it,
Sure.
and maybe even tie in a little bit, if there is a tie-in, as it relates to the term that you referred to, which is the distributed campaign model as well?
Right. So if you think about traditional campaigning, it was all about convening everyone in one place. So it was very top down. Let's go to a staging location nearby or a rally and get our clipboards and assignments, and then we all like push out from there. And that's a good model for lots of types of organizing, because you can bring everyone together, you can have an expert train them in one place, and then you can all disseminate out to do the work. But it's very hard to do. It's very resource intense. It requires a lot of like staff overhead, and it's increasingly difficult as the population exponentially grows. You don't see campaigns adapting and exponentially growing their training staffs. So this concept of distributed organizing is really the idea that, okay, all of these people are like, these are smart people. They're not just a volunteer. They are somebody who has a job and a life and connections, and they actually know a lot about their own neighborhood. They know a lot more about it than somebody who sits in DC and makes television ads. And we can actually train the trainer. We can train hundreds of people or thousands of people all across the country to run their own little coterie of 10 or 20 people. And that's the idea of like a squad, right? The military does that, where you have someone all the way at the top who commands an organization of 2 million people in a pyramid, so that every group is ultimately 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, we haven't been there yet.
And so 4 or 5 people, like units of 4 or 5 people, add up to 2 million, and there's a structure to the whole thing. And now that's obviously very top down, and there's mechanisms for that have been built over time, but we can use, a similar kind of softer model for distributed organizing, which is the idea that each of us has a certain amount of labor in our own neighborhoods we can do, and we need to pull in more people around us, organize our friends of 5 or 10, maybe a little local city region of a few hundred, and work with them to help all of them have a good experience and to bring them more into the fold. And so that's the idea of distributed organizing. The term relational organizing has become a buzzword in politics, but it's really just the same thing everyone should have always been doing, right? Like, you invite your friends to the rally, you tell your family at the dinner table about an interesting thing you heard about. That's the way the world works. You talk to people you have relationships with. And as opposed to mass media, like broadcast messaging, which is just, I make one message, I advertise it to millions of people at once. So relational organizing is this idea that, hey, it's actually more effective if, rather than this known political person, Hillary Clinton, gets up and endorses Joe Biden, it's if Jeremy tells his 3 friends that, like, I've met Joe Biden and I thought he was very impressive and I actually am excited to vote for him. Or I met Beto O'Rourke and he was very charismatic and he's going to do something about gun reform even in the state of Texas, right? He's not afraid to talk about it seriously. And that is like more impactful to people who know Jeremy, because it's like oh, okay, this is like someone I know who's giving me a benchmark and a safe mental space to think about voting in a way that maybe I haven't participated in before. So relational organizing is about recognizing your own relationships and thinking about, is this someone who I feel comfortable enough talking to about something that really matters to me? And am I willing to do that? And the tools that have been created are all aimed at helping people and organizations keep track of those conversations so that you can have a sustained effort that is efficient. Because what we don't want to do is all talk to the people who are very safe to talk to, like everyone on this call, and say, you know what, I feel safe talking to Scott about progressive politics, so I'm only going to talk to Scott. Or Ana Lopez is from my team, I can talk to her about voter registration. But I already know that Ana Lopez is all the way bought in on voter registration. And it's actually not very useful for a campaign if I spend my time trying to convince her to vote for a Democrat, because I can feel pretty confident about she's going to handle that on her own. And so really what I should be focused on is, say, like my youngest sister who is voting for the first time and may not care about politics as much, and is not yet aware of the various conflicts in the world, or hasn't seen the reasons why it really matters who you elect. And helping her vote could be much more impactful in the long run than if I talk to someone I just feel safe talking to, which is, somebody who's already preaching to the choir.
Right. So, well, that's a great explanation. And as you say, relational organizing has become quite the buzzword. And sometimes it's really good for us to understand that these things are really come natural to us. And, sometimes even though they come natural, they're not easy, because it can be a tense conversation. As we look at the world and kind of what's going on around us in front of our eyes, I mean, here we are at this inflection point and the kind of history of humankind, it's we're really at a key time here where we're seeing in our own country. You alluded to it earlier. Some things coming to pass whereby the politicization of the divide as in the context of this disease and what we can do about it from a grassroots kind of, you can make a difference by staying home or by wearing a mask, and some people are not willing to go along with that. So we find ourselves in a scary moment now with civil tension on a level at a time when we are vulnerable because we're hurt as a whole. And I'm just, obviously a scary time. What can we learn from a kind of in terms of how we put our energy into politics and to our mission here that we're obviously all committed to in this 2020 cycle, and balancing that as we take on some of these very difficult conversations that you alluded to, and there's, you know, there's some people that maybe are going to be just really hard to ever get through to. And you talk a little bit about kind of where we sit in this this really tinderbox, and us as volunteers, how we you know, come to terms with doing as much as we can, but, you know, staying somewhat safe.
For sure. I think that's one of the hardest things about this current crisis is we were on this clear path towards having record turnout in 2020 and potentially, you know, just tremendous opportunity to really change the electorate everywhere. And I think that's still true, but for a totally opposite reason now, which is that we're on track to have very low turnout, which means like you can win anywhere. We could win Idaho or Montana or, you know, Indiana now, because if lots of people aren't voting, the number you need to win gets a lot smaller. And our voters are still here. We just have to make it, we have to make it safe for them to vote. We have to help them through mostly education, right? Like it's almost all of the problems that we have on this front are like a voter education issue around, it's like whether or not they know how to vote, the mechanisms, and when and where, like the logistics, the why, like why. The number one reason of all public research of like people who did not vote is that when people say, why didn't you vote? The number one response is, nobody asked me to. Like literally the number one thing. The number two is, I didn't know there was an election. And the last one, the number three is, you know, I didn't trust any of these people. I didn't know who to vote for. And so like the biggest three things out there are almost purely a problem of leaving people out of the electorate. And that is, it's mostly an accident. It's that the electorate is so big. We have 210 million registered voters in America right now. And Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump together had about 127 million, I think, actually voted. And maybe with the other parties, it was like 130 million. So we have nearly 80 million people who were registered and didn't vote. And then we had another like 55 million people who weren't even registered. So we had about 135 million, you know, who voted and about 135 million who didn't in total, of like eligible adults who could have. And a big reason for that is that all of our lists that the candidates use, that Beto uses, that all of, you know, that Joe Biden is going to use, it's in the system called VAN, which many of you are probably familiar with. VAN only has a list of existing registered voters. So in Texas, you know, we have another 5 million people at least who are not registered to vote right now. We think it's closer to 7. And there's just like, they're not even in the list. So no candidate, even if they wanted to, can include them in their advertisements or their mail or their text messages, their phone banks, or their door-to-door, because those people are completely missing from the file. And we're treating it in politics by default because of our infrastructure as though anyone who didn't bother to get themselves registered to vote isn't worth talking to. When in fact, people are being deleted off of lists illegally, and people are being removed from lists by mistake, because their name, my name is very common. So Jeremy Smith, right? And I have been stopped at the ports of entry because of other Jeremy Smiths who have warrants for their arrest. I was deleted and purged from the Texas voter rolls in 2010. There's, you know, just like, there's just mismatches because like my name is so common. There's a lot of other Jeremy Smiths to get me confused with. There are people who aren't aware of elections. No, they're working multiple jobs in the era of coronavirus and they can't stay home. So there's this problem of, we're not actually trying to reach more people, and we're not keeping track. Our method of keeping track is to call all the rich people who have donated to candidates before, and then to spend that money on television ads and hope that we get enough votes. And that is a bad strategy. That is just an awful, it's a strategy that says I didn't have a better plan. I figured this is the best I could do. And that's fine, except that we have millions of people who would like to fucking help you right now to win the election. And what we need to be doing is empowering those millions of people to do, you know, a handful of things. If the millions of existing Democrats who voted in the primary, if we could get everybody who voted in the Democratic primaries around the country to go get 5 friends in their own neighborhood, just 5 friends, we would win the election by a landslide. We would win 400 electoral votes. That's like, I mean, it's such a, when you break the problem down, it is imminently solvable because there are actually so many of us. The problem is it's an infrastructure challenge to get 30 million people to work together in concert. And literally nothing in the world works that way, except I think McDonald's. I think McDonald's feeds like 1% of the world's population every day. So they're getting like 70 million. And what we should probably do is copy whatever they're doing and try to do half as good as McDonald's. We would win the election. And I think that that's like what it takes. We have to think about it as a serious pursuit. It requires resourcing. It requires like hiring and retaining people, training them, potentially having like work hybrids where it's people can come work for a campaign for 3 months out of the year, take a sabbatical from their normal, job. It requires like that we build the infrastructure in our neighborhoods and in our communities and our districts to really win and take it seriously. And I think it requires a system. We need a way where we can all stay in tune with what information's already out there. Because if Jeremy Smith is shouting his intention to vote for Democrats online, that should be something that is cataloged and listed and kept track of so that all of you don't have to waste time reaching out to me to try to convince me to vote. Instead, we can work together to create more volunteer recruitment or something that I'm, like it's more appropriate to ask me to do at this point than to ask me the first question, which is like, do you even plan to vote? And we know that information already. It's out there. It's public domain. I mean, it's essentially available. You can see that Jeremy Smith has voted in all of these primaries. And so this is a knowable fact that we should be able to all use. And all of you should have a quick access to see who it is that you can help with right now without revealing anyone's private information. Like I think there's some major privacy concerns that election teams have not done a good job of making. We don't want to dox everyone in America either. But there are ways, the simple ways for us to reach out to our own friends, family, and neighbors, contribute that back into the whole, and win more elections. And I think that what we have to do is be willing to do more. Like in this, it should be a part of our, like if you think about a routine, like the way we think about exercise or eating, right? Like 3 times a day, most of us stop and prep a meal in some form or fashion. Maybe we order it, maybe we cook it ourselves, maybe we reheat something very simply, right? But there's work and labor that goes into that in a small amount every day. And the same with exercise or with house maintenance or and if we think about things that matter in the world, like maintaining our health is very important. Maintaining the civic health of our nation is very important. And it shouldn't be something that we all need to give up our entire lives doing if everybody is willing to give up 1%. If we could give up 1% of our time to help work on behalf of people and candidates and causes, then I think we could achieve a lot more. But we also have to convince other people to do the same thing. And we have to make it safe for them to do that. And we have to make it interesting and worthwhile. We can't just ask them to come phone bank and be bored 99 times out of 100. That's not a good solution. So we have to be creative about how do we do this? How do we make it fun? How do we make it interesting? And so, one of the things that the Blue Squad has been trying to do is like come up with badges. And there are crowd created badges, and each badge actually has like a history lesson behind it. So there's a series of badges for like helping people register to vote that when you win the badge, it teaches you about famous people who helped change the laws about voter registration. And the idea there is like, let's make this so worthwhile that it becomes more appropriate and normal to do it. But it's an early tool, and it's going to take another year before it's as good as everybody wants it to be. And so it takes time, and it takes feedback, and it takes people testing it and breaking it and making it work better. And maybe Blue Squad's not the final solution or the appropriate best solution for us, right? Maybe what we need is something else that's out there or something new that someone else will come up with. And I think we all have to be like open to that. And in particular, to pitch in and do more and lean in sometimes, because sometimes the people running the campaign don't know what to do with 10,000 volunteers. But if a group like Envoys or another volunteer organization can say, we've got this area, we've got our areas taken care of, and we've got a network that's ready to go. So some basic things that the presidential campaign needs are a list of volunteers that have spare rooms or spare couches or spare beds that staff could crash on during the GOTV period, September through November, staff or volunteers. Especially if you're in a major battleground state, there will be 20,000 plus volunteers who drive or fly to Florida assuming we have a normal election, which I think is totally up in the air. But there will be like 20,000 volunteers who travel to the state of Florida, stay in other people's homes and do campaigning. and people will call and text into Florida and Pennsylvania and all of these other states. And so it's really important, if you live in one of those states, to have a community of people willing to take volunteers in. And if you're living elsewhere outside of one of those states, it's really important to have a list of volunteers who are willing to travel or willing to phone bank or anything else, and to create a fun way to do that in your own spaces. So like here in our home, we held like a lot of phone banks. For my partner held them for Elizabeth Warren, right? Like we had them in our home, we had them in our office, right? During the 2018 campaign, right? A lot of people turned their homes into staging locations for distributed organizing for the Beto campaign. And that's what we need to do. It needs to be interesting and fun and worthwhile. That people come and have a good experience, and that they are recognized for that, and like rewarded and appreciated and reached out to, just as though you were like trying to build an authentic relationship with them for any other purpose. And I think of it as like you're trying to speed date about 1,000 voters, and if you can do a good job of that with as many people as you can, and create a good and like that they want to come talk to you again, that's the desired outcome. You want them to swipe right on our candidate. I like to run with metaphors, so
Yeah, no, we love it. Everybody relates, and we really relate to a lot of. It's so validating hearing you talk. As you know, we and Envoys are looking at tracking action donations and recognizing action donations. I feel like action donations, as opposed to monetary donations, are very underrated, and we need to bring that into the kind of lexicon that's thrown around the culture of campaigning, so that we can keep people involved and engaged. And that's one of the things I love about Blue Squad. We have a question that popped up from Jody Johnson, who's an attorney in the Dallas area. Jody's curious about she would just love to know where that fact comes from. The number one reason people don't vote is because no one asked. Any other insight into that, Jeremy?
Yep. So that is from the Pew Government Survey on like civic society, I think is what it's called. And it is it's a specific survey done of like registered voters, unregistered voters. Why did you vote? Why didn't you vote? And I just put a note in there. Ana Lopez and I will track it down and send it to you, Scott, just so that everybody has. And it's got like charts on, what are the various reasons, and lots more details about like, it was too far away, it was too hard, I tried and I got turned away. There were over 1 million people in 2016 who tried to vote and were turned away at the polls because they either weren't registered to vote, or they went to the wrong polling location, or they were turned away incorrectly because of confusion. And there are examples of like dumb confusion we should be able to fix. Women who got married, changed their last name, but then never updated their voter registration signature, so their signature doesn't match now, and which is the dumbest reason I can imagine for not letting someone vote. Using your Mark 1 eyeball to evaluate someone's signature. There's just a lot of reasons for people being denied voting or being turned away from voting, in addition to the being confused and not knowing about it in the first place. And here's another little kind of example. This year, there are 110,000 races for public office across America, happening on 109 unique election days, which means nearly every third day is an election day somewhere in America. Right, we just had a bunch of city council races in like Nashville. There's races going. There's local elections in Texas in May and June. There are people everywhere constantly having elections by the hundreds or the thousands. And we call it, this is the election year. Next year, there are 70,000, I think it's like 75,000 races for public office in 2021 across like 100 unique days. So none of us know what all of the election days are. None of us know who all the candidates are. It is absurd how difficult it is to even keep track. And it's actually like a major selling point of what Civitech, what we do is actually just collect information about there is an election today. It's like an important and valuable resource. And it's we work with a partner called Ballot Ready, who has like the best information on that. And they produce like awesome ballot guides. And we're trying to embed products like that in all of these other tools, so that you partner with people who know things like that. But there's so many difficulties to even voting, like starting with like Texas local elections on a random day in May that no one knows about have an average turnout of 4%. So 1 out of 25 people is deciding who your elected officials are at the school board and city council and county level in most counties in Texas. And there are other states that have the exact same kind of same thing. So we just have a lot of like messiness in the election system and in who has power and gets to exercise it over other people. And these have like real world consequences. And what we need to make sure that the cynical idea that elections don't matter is a very privileged position to hold, because the people who are harmed by your lack of participation, that is not, it's not, they don't believe that it doesn't matter, right? So I think we have an obligation to do a lot more on that front. But we can send out some information from Pew and others. And I think the Pew government surveys are usually the best that I have seen on this front. And there's a few researchers. There's a guy named Michael McDonald in Florida, and Tufts University, I think, has the best voter registration research. There's some like independent progressive groups that have really good research into our mechanisms and methods as a community. But for like generic voter registration nationwide, I think Tufts University pushes out all kinds of public stuff.
Wow, that's great to know, Jeremy. As we come into the home stretch here, we haven't really hit too much on stuff that kind of gets into your mind on the epidemiology front with regards to the current outbreak, and at the same time, I'm really fascinated by just what I feel like. I went to school and at UT back in the late 70s, early 80s, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was making the scene then, and I was way into music back in those days. I knew the guy was going to be a star, and I was seeing him for $2, at the Continental Club, these little dives. And I see you, obviously I know great things are coming from you that are going to transcend who knows what as we move forward in the political technologist world. So where in the kind of epidemiologist kind of mindset and the political technologist kind of realm do you see your future going? Do they merge at all? Does what we're experiencing right now cause you to rethink, where you're going? And as we wind up here, just let us have a little insight into what goes on in the mind of Jeremy Smith at times like this, given all of these exciting potential that I know you've got to feel that you have, in front of you, being such a young and inspiring leader. So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's very kind. You definitely touched on like the heart of something, which is I trained a long time to respond to diseases, and I spent a lot of time in sub-Saharan Africa doing infectious disease work. And it feels really strange right now to like not help at all. Like, because to be clear, I am completely useless to everybody in the time of coronavirus from the standpoint of actually dealing with the public health crisis. But I wanted to work on public health problems for Hillary Clinton. If there was a real government and a real but like the unit I would have potentially worked in also was disbanded by the Trump administration, right? The pandemic readiness unit. And so like, and there's also like counterterrorism stuff that I've worked on before that I might do as well. But I think it just matters. I think infrastructure matters a lot. Like you need to support lots of people in these systems. You need to like craft a health service that can service hundreds of millions of people regularly, with much lower costs and far fewer middlemen. But it requires it requires bureaucracy, it requires creativity, it requires effort and care in the language. So I absolutely love working in the realm of like public service. I think it is critical that we do a good job at it. And I definitely, like growing up, never considered business to be my thing at all. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't care. And so this is very new to me to like be in a company, of course. Now it fits my interest. It's a public benefit company that like, or two public benefit companies that only help Democrats win elections. So, I'm cheating. But I think it's that growing up, I like always saw, so my mother was a community health primary care doctor, and my grandmother was a public school teacher, and my public school teachers were always kind and wonderful, even though, I didn't go to necessarily like great schools growing up. And there were other types of endemic poverty problems where I grew up, but people still tried. It was like, that always stuck with me, was just there are so many people who are earnestly trying to do better, who want to be better. And being in the military is being surrounded by people who want to become Superman, right? They want to help more people. And even though it's kind of, it's a childish thing to want to be Superman, it is born out of a desire usually to help other people and prevent bad things from happening to them. The same is true in medicine. The same is true in like politics for the most part. There are, of course, some cynical people who just want you to see them on television. Um, and I think it's like worthy to be involved in public life, whether or not you do it full time. Like people can do politics, they can participate, they can do civic good, they can work for nonprofits as volunteers, even while working at private companies, even while working in other domains. And I think we have to welcome that. And we have to be a welcoming place that doesn't, one of the kind of things that happened, I think, to Beto and other candidates was they got criticized for how much oil and gas money they like took during their elections or something. But it would be like humans who worked for oil related companies, right? Who wanted to vote for Beto and wanted to support Beto, but that was their job. And the idea that that's somehow bad, that those people are dirty, I think is it's a bad philosophy to demonize or dehumanize other people, no matter how, uh, no matter what their beliefs or what their job might be. And so I think we have to find a way to be welcoming in that. And I think the kinds of people who always that I admired and wanted to be like in my school and elsewhere are the ones that I want to emulate now, and to be a person that is like worth other people trying to do the same. And that's kind of the leadership lesson that West Point really, I think, instills in people is you have a duty to others, regardless of whether or not you want to acknowledge it. That if you have any kind of capacity or power at times, then it matters that you use it for good. And so I like that. I read a lot of Star Wars books growing up or something, right? And I think those are the kinds of things that should be the world we're trying to create. It's like one that is not a rebellion against an evil empire. Maybe Star Trek's a better example. Like one in which people take care of other people and do the right thing because it's the normal right thing, and it's not seen as heroic to do the right thing. It should just be perfectly appropriate to lead others without encouraging them to drink bleach. Like, I don't know, why our standards have shifted so much, but it is not such a heavy lift to have a normal, healthy public life where we don't need celebrities to be our civil servants, and instead professionals with expertise who know things about engineering and science and art and the humanities and others. And I think that that's what we need to keep pushing on.
Well, it's so fascinating to hear you talk, and you hit on things that make me want to ask this question and that question and to keep going. And we are so grateful for your time and for, as I say, for the way you've helped Envoys on so many levels. And we're really just getting started, and it means so much to us to have you here. And I feel so grateful that we have fallen in with you guys. And so thank you so very much for giving us that time. And it kind of hurts to take this a little further, because there's about 3 or 4 questions that are right on the back of my tongue right now that I would like.
You should write them down.
I will. But in any case, out of respect to your time and to everybody else, I'm glad we got a couple of questions in there from others. And we had some people attending tonight that I hope are going to be inspired to get on to go with Blue Squad, to check into Civitech. I know we have some political candidates that are with us this evening from Ohio. We've got Aaron Rosiello and we've got Alan Darnowski with us. They're both running for the State House up there. And they've got a super majority that they're trying to get past. They only need two candidates to win to break that super majority in Ohio. So I'm really excited to have them hearing from you and hearing about Civitech. And there might be some other people out there as well that fall into that category. But anyway, thank you so much, Jeremy. And we will hope to get you back on here again as we move forward, and if at all possible. But I know your time is super busy, and this is a crazy cycle. So thank you so much for coming. And again, we're so grateful.
Well, thank you all for having me. This is very kind of you. Glad to be in service to people like you and to work with people like you. And so, you know, we'll keep, please send any feedback. We're like a bunch of people like you who want to keep changing it and making it better. And we're going to keep trying to improve that volunteer experience.
Excellent. Excellent.
Really appreciate you, Jeremy.
Yes, yes. And with that, we are going to have Kristen Reed introduce her friend, Keith Sanchez, who is an artist and is also interested in the merging of technology and the arts, and is doing so with incredible programming. I listened to him for the first time yesterday. I was completely blown away. So Kristen, will you introduce your wonderful friend, Keith Sanchez, for us?
Yes. So Keith and his lovely wife, Anna, who is extremely important to getting that programming through, right, Keith? I've known Keith for about 20 years, Anna for a little less than that, but he's an incredibly gifted musician. He was with the band named Stoic Frame for a very, very long time, and then began to produce his own solo music and with a group called Keith and the Moon Thieves. And they have been, during this time of quarantine and pandemic, they've been using Facebook Live to stream and raise money for good causes, with Keith playing music in his living room and just got, taking requests through the comments. And it just was such a great, it made everybody feel better. It made us feel like we were getting together, and it was such a positive thing. So they took that to another level and started doing a program called Sunday Sessions, where they're going to be raising money on Sundays, with the exception of Mother's Day, for good causes, that people who are hard hit by the pandemic in different ways. And they just did a program last night, which you can actually check out on Keith's page. And our local news actually covered them on KRQE. They were very impressed by what they're doing. And it's just a beautiful effort to bring people together and make things a little better with good music and help people that are hurting right now. So he also teaches live Facebook Live music lessons. Is that right, Keith? Every day?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys might actually, some of you who have kids might actually benefit from this. Why don't you tell them real quick about that too?
So I do. I'm also a public school teacher. So I teach English and cultural studies at a high school here in the South Valley in Albuquerque. So all of that kind of channels into the same concept. I feel like that exchange, that fusion of educational kind of a bringing together of people for music, for the arts, but also for linking us to each other. If there's one thing that we all have in common, if there's one thing that transcends borders, it's music.
Right.
And so we kind of came into this space. My wife and I returned from California, and we're originally from New Mexico. So we came home, and saw this incredible void. As you know, the arts are just dying in schools. Extracurricular arts programs are inaccessible to most of our kids. They're far too expensive. And so we said, what are we going to do to reach out and provide arts programs for kids that can't afford it, for families that don't have access? And so we started the New Mexico Academy of Rock and Blues. And it started as just a summer and a winter break program, but then it grew into an after school program, and we're receiving grants from the city of Albuquerque, and it's growing and growing. And as Kristen said, due to the amazing insight and foresight and brain of my wife, Anna, it's become much more than just a music educational program. And it really is a community outreach program that's connecting people to organizations that are working in the community, to not-for-profits, to people on the go like all of you. So it's growing into something that we didn't expect, and that is kind of a connecting force. So this program is one that brings in other artists, including graphic artists and spoken word poets, and people that are on the go, people aspiring to run for office, for example, will come in and share their stories, swap stories. The artists learn each other's songs, and there's a live painter painting a piece that went for auction. The painter last night painted a mask, kind of in honor of our COVID struggle right now. So it's that's kind of what it is. That's kind of what we're doing in a nutshell. It's sort of a big conglomeration of ideas, but it centers around the arts.
So are you going to play a little for us?
Got it. You guys okay with that? Do you need to get going?
No,
Yeah.
no, we're all ears. This is,
right.
we're so honored.
Okay. Okay. aquel día bajo lluvia tan fría, cuando regaste besos yo temblaba hasta los huesos, encendiaste las estrellas, siguiéndome tus huellas, lo tonto que recibas, el amor que yo quería, no sería ella. El antídoto es algo que ya no creía. Licor de caña, nunca me engaña. Esa fogata de calor, maldición de tu sabor. Licor de caña, nunca me engaña. Esa fogata de calor, maldición de tu favor. Licor de caña, sí, licor de caña. No, no, no. Recuerdan la palabra y los ojitos que hablaban, sonido del susurro, escalándote el muro. Te agarraste más que estrellas, siguiéndome tus huellas, del tonto recibió el desastre que dejó, sirve de una cerilla, El antídoto es algo que ya no creía. Licor de caña, nunca me engaña. Esta fogata de calor, maldición de tu sabor, licor de caña, que mataraña. Esta fogata de calor, maldición de tu sabor, licor de caña. Sí, licor de caña. No, en vez de tomar vinagre, del rencor, el aguardiente es el dulce sabor para tomar y amar todo dolor de la perdida del guerrero, del amor. Licor de caña, sí, licor de caña, no, licor de caña, oh, 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 licor de caña, oh, 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 licor de caña. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
It's unfortunate that
Thank you.
Zoom is such a pain. And go ahead.
Oh, is there, what's that, Kristen?
The Zoom is a pain to try to play on, huh?
Well, yeah, and I don't, normally I'd have, run it through a kind of a soundboard and interface to
Yeah.
make it sound better. You know, I just kind of did it on the fly today. So,
I think they got a taste, and then I was just typing in a message that I'm gonna put a link to the page
okay,
in the Envoys for Humanity group so that they can go check out your videos, like last night's video, and there's a bunch of videos where, like he's saying, you can hear like nice and clearly because there's a soundboard interfacing. But you sound amazing.
thank Kristen, thank you for having me, and thank all of you. Thank you for what you're
Thank you
doing.
very much. Thank you so much. Yes, great.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
Welcome, Kristen. Thank you.
Thank
We're-
you.
Thank you for what you're doing. Anything that I can do, please let me know. Kristen, please let me know. Scott, here will be one of your foot soldiers here in Albuquerque. Okay.
We will, I think hopefully everybody will tune in for your Sunday sessions.
Okay.
We'll post about, you can post them now, you're members of the groups, you can post them in there.
Sure.
You know, Envoys for Humanity, so that everybody knows what's going on and can tune in and maybe donate a little bit for whatever causes.
Great.
And
Okay.
we're going to try to get some interesting guests to pop in for those. Anna and I were scheming.
Okay. Great. Good. It's for a good cause.
Do you want to play anything else, Keith, or?
Well, do you have other things on your agenda? I don't want to interrupt what you're doing.
We do not, Keith. We do not have anything. We're just going to chat a little bit, just socially
Okay.
at the end here. And if you'd like to play another, if you've got another one in you, it would be awesome. I don't know if you can turn the camera down a little bit, even if we
Sure.
can just see those fingers, because what you do with that fretboard is just out of hand.
Oh, I think that helps with the sound too a little bit.
Sound with it, yeah? Okay. Great.
I think as long as you're facing the camera pretty squarely, we can hear it all.
Okay. This is my Willie Nelson guitar right there.
Right?
Oh, wow.
Maybe if we mute ourselves.
What's that?
Maybe if we each mute ourselves. It might
Yes,
help.
yeah. Kari will
I'll
mute everybody.
I'll mute everybody right now, and I'll unmute Keith.
Okay.
You're good.
So this one's kind of a piece of lament, and it was actually kind of when I was dreaming it up, was with a political candidate in mind. So this is a song called "Change the World." Have you ever seen anything as sweet as the light that struck your eyes when you were born? And have you ever seen anything as brilliant as the day they let the bomb whistle away? And have you ever been picked up and whisked away by the drunken fire? Love was here to stay. And if you ever were, if they call you a good shot to miss the mark, a lead role standing in the dark on a stage alone, on this stage alone. All the papers had to say was that our brides slipped away. Just lace your shoes up and don't you fail to change the world. Change the world. Have you ever heard serum in a wine? Just the antidote to leave it all behind. Have you ever drank this sweet taste of wine? Just the antidote to leave it all behind. Have you ever been picked up and whisked away by the drunken fire? Love was here to stay. And if you ever were, if they call you a good shot to miss the mark, a lead role standing in the dark on a stage alone, on this stage alone. All the papers had to say was that our best years slipped away. Just lace your shoes up and don't you fail to change the world. So, why do people always say that our brightest burn away? Just lace your shoes on and don't you fail to change the world. Change it, change the world. Change the world. Change the world. Yeah, let's stop up.
Well, I'm gonna put them right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Oh, that was so good.
Well, thank you so much for having me today again. Thank you.
for being there.
Thank you.
I'd love to sit in more and learn from you and listen to all of your stories and see what you're doing out there in your communities. And thank you for being active and for doing that. We need that energy, and we desperately need it. So thank you. Thank you. Sure.
I've got something for you, but in a minute, not right now.
What now?
Okay.
So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
So much.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it.
God, thank you.
Bye.
So-
Love you guys.
Bye,
Bye.
Kristen.
Bye.
I believe we have Steve Bridges ready to have a couple of words with us about next week's guest.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. We have somebody coming on. She's an old friend of mine. Her name is Judith McGarry. She is the founder and executive director of the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance, which has been around for a little over 15 years. And what she's doing is trying to be a counterbalance to the rules and regulations that are written for agriculture in this country that greatly outweigh small and local farms and seek to only serve the large industrial scale producers. Agriculture in this country started to industrialize after World War II as we turned our bomb making ability to farm fertilizing ability. And since then, it's only gotten worse. The whole farming industry has consolidated and concentrated to the point where it's really hard for small producers, even like myself. Y'all may know me, I raise pigs. I have about 75 pigs. It's hard for us to compete with the large scale producers because the rules are written for them and not for us. So Judith McGarry has really been an advocate for small farms. She started back in 2000 when the federal government wanted to start what they call the National Animal Identification System. They wanted to actually put a chip in every farm animal in this country. So me having goats and chickens and pigs, I would have to tag every animal. Somebody that had 100,000 chickens in a big warehouse only had to have one tag number for the whole warehouse. And so she was, through her group, got the word out, educated people, and helped to shut that down before it became law. And what she's working on now really is something that affects me. There's a bill trying to work through Congress called the Prime Act. Raising pigs, I have to take my pigs if I want to resell the meat to a federally or state inspected facility. And there's not very many of them because, again, the rules, these small producers that run these processing facilities have to follow the same rules as a facility that might process 100,000 animals a month instead of maybe 75 animals a month. So she's really trying to push the Prime Act through that would benefit small scale local meat producers like myself. So she's going to be on next week. I think you'll find her interesting. She has her ear to the ground on what's going on with local community-based farms and our food system, especially in relation to what's going on with the COVID-19 thing right now, which, as we know, is starting to impact our food system. And it's kind of an interesting fact. Back between 2002 and 2008, I was the executive director of the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. And one fact that I learned back then that really stuck with me is the state of Texas runs all their produce through 3 main terminals. There's one in Houston, there's one in San Antonio, and there's one in Dallas. And they have at any time less than a week's supply of produce in Texas in those warehouses to get out to all the restaurants and grocery stores. And so our food system is in a precarious situation and how it could be impacted by, as we're seeing, our food processing people getting sick and not being able to come to work. So anyway, tune in next week. We'll all learn from Judith McGarry of the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance.
Sounds great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. Thank you, Steve, so much. Thank you, guys. Another great week. I think they just keep getting better. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Let's see if this will work. And we're going to talk about what we have going on. Did that work? Can you guys see that? What we have going on next week, or the rest of this week. And so Tomorrow, May 5th, we're going to have a Cinco de Mayo themed postcarding writing party. It's our first virtual party, so it'll be pretty cool to see how we can work it out. So if you're not already, then go to Postcards for Voters and become an approved approved writer, and you can get addresses. And we're just gonna have our favorite margarita. We can share our favorite recipes and write postcards. And the postcards we're actually gonna be writing for on Tuesday will be for a representative. She's running in Wisconsin for the 7th district. And it's another seat that we have a chance to flip back to blue. It was blue for about 42 years, and then it went red in 2011, and now there's a vacancy for a special election for May 12th. And then our virtual phone bank will be on Saturday, and another special election on May 12th in California. And that seat is the seat that Katie Porter had won in 2018, and then she had to resign and it opened up. And so it's a brand new blue seat. So we need to really do all we can for California 25 to hold on to what we were able to make blue. And so that's another important one. We'll be doing a virtual phone bank. So again, on Zoom, we're gonna hang out. We can share stories in the chat. So again, kind of like it touched back on what Jeremy was talking about, and he had such great points. When I hear him speak, it just makes me excited because we are doing so many of the things that he's talking about, and things of making it fun and easy and manageable. So we will do phone banking, which is not always the funnest for people, but we're going to do it in a group setting all over the country to be able to chat with each other and celebrate when we get those great calls and stuff. So that'll be Saturday. Links will be on Envoy Way, in Facebook, and also in our virtual headquarters on Workplace. So I don't even know how to get back to, okay, here we go.
You're back. and don't forget the dancing.
Oh, what?
The dancing.
Yes, we will dance. That is a virtual thing that we have to do. So if you get somebody that's going to vote or said that they've mailed in their ballot already, we got to do a dance. Maybe we'll have a best prize. The dances might get better as we drink our margaritas.
He's already dancing.
I think Mark McKee's going to win the dance contest.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah, buddy. Yeah.
100%.
So I am going to put some important links of, hopefully, did that work? Let me see. Okay. So I'm going to put some important links in the chats that kind of covered, did that do all of them? I don't know. There we go. So a couple of important links that I pulled from the chat to put in one place. So the map to vote, register to vote, map to vote, register to vote are both with Jeremy. Postcard to voters. Thank you, Tony, for being on this call. We're really excited to have you here. Postcard to voter. We're doing a lot of hi, hello. We're working with them also because the postcards is such a great thing and everybody loves doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we might just have to have you as a guest one of these days, not to put you on the spot. But and then also go to our link if you're not already within our virtual headquarters. I know a lot of you guys are already, but please share this link for anybody that you think would be a great envoy. Again, they don't even have to be politically active, but you just know that they just want to do something and they don't know what to do with that energy. So envoysforhumanity.org, send them that link. It's a way to get them to join and become part of our virtual headquarters where we talk about all the stuff that we're going to be doing. And yeah, so I think that's officially the end of our Zocalo for this week. And thank you guys for joining. Again, I'm going to stay around for a little bit. A few of us will be around for a little bit, for a few more minutes. If you just want to chat and say hi, very unofficial.
We want to see Mark dance.
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to end this official portion, so I'm going to pull up all the recordings, but thank you guys for joining us. And again, stick around if you just want to hang out. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.